Click here anytime to view the post on Restream. Okay. I think I'm alive. I'm seeing hellos, which is good. It's been a while since I've been on this particular format to chat with people, so I'm just want to watch some of your comments pop in, and it's great to see you guys. Oh my gosh, from Germany and Florida and Nevada. I have people from all over. You guys, it's so good to see you all. I hope that the connection is decent. I am coming to you from La Veta, Colorado, so we always have, we're behind some of the more greater metropolises of the world, so it seems like it's working. And I appreciate that, John. I got John being Mr. Producer on the other end, so if I'm looking at my phone, I'm just trying to connect with some questions and some considerations that might be coming up. You guys, oh my gosh, Jacksboro, Texas. Do you know I'm from Wichita Falls? Now, I won't be able to see your response, but that's crazy, you guys. We're going to have such a great time. This is such a fun project. And while we're getting started here, I just want to say I'm calling it the ultimate mystery quilt because you're all going to make the same thing, but every single one of them will turn out different. And this is the biggest thing you have to know. You can't plan how it will look whenever it's finished. It's just going to turn out the way it turns out on its own. So listen to this. If you had a kaleidoscope and you picked it up, maybe you're just in the store browsing and you see one on the shelf. You pick it up and you put it up to your eye, you turn it, the glass or the rocks or whatever's inside, they twist and turn and you get what you get. You don't get to plan what you see in a kaleidoscope, and this is pretty much exactly the same way. So it's really fun, and I thought today one of the things that I would do is I would give you the story, the full story on how this came to be. So because today, all we're going to do today is talk about fabric selection, and I'm going to tell you how to make your strata. I'll explain all of that. We won't even draw our templates or patterns until the Friday session. So today is an overview, getting you started. And I find that most students spend anywhere between, 4 and 7 hours making the strata. So this gives you several days to accomplish that. And so just kind of expect that. So the other thing that I'd like to say before we get started, as you're all flying in, I keep your comments coming. That's beautiful. I love hearing from you and seeing all of those. But I will reserve questions and answers to the end. So I will. So if you, as I go along today, if you have a question, don't forget it. Just jot it down on a piece of paper or something, and then I'll answer as many questions as I can as we move to the end of today. So it's good to see you all, and thank you for joining me. We're doing this, of course, on the quiltshow.com as part of the quiltshow.com endeavors. And these classes, once they're recorded, because they're being recorded right now, once they're finished, they will then be posted in the Learn section of the quiltshow.com. So if you're not watching live, or if you have somebody that you're excited about and you get excited about this and want to share it with them, they haven't missed anything because you can go back and watch. So here we go. So I want to tell you a story. I was in St. Louis, Missouri, and I was a baby quilter. I started quilting in 1991, and I quickly got into a guild. And one of the ladies in the guild, her name was Suzanne Marshall. Now, Suzanne is known worldwide for her amazing ability to do hand applique, hand quilting. She's won numerous best hand workmanship awards at the big shows. And she became a really great friend of mine. But I have to tell you, when I first started quilting, applique was not my thing. My first applique is horrible. But after I met Suzanne, I wanted to learn to do better applique. So I'm going to show you a quilt because this quilt relates to how this whole project came to be. I may have to stand up for this. This is a quilt that I made in probably 1992 named Fan Dance. All right. So let's just take a look at it here. Whoops, let me get it straight. There we go. Now I have it upside down. Ha! You guys, don't laugh at me. It's not my first rodeo, but I am challenged. So here's the quilt. And you can see the applique of these figures. I'm going to hold that up so you can see. Those figures right there. I pieced the background, and I pieced the background with these little wedge shapes behind their backs. But when I finished the background, you can see if you look to the left and the right of the dancers, you see like a necktie shape or a blade, and those fabrics kind of continue out into that area. Well, I was just going to make the center section. This is all I wanted to do, was practice my applique, but I liked those blades. So what I did is I ended up making some strata. We'll talk about strata. I ended up making some strata, and I folded it together, and I cut more blades, and you'll see, if you look at the whole fan, let me go to the top, you'll see that the top two blades are a mirror image of each other. The ones right here between my head, on the east side of my head. And then if you go to this one and this one, you'll see that they're a mirror image of each other. And all of those blades are each mirror images of each other. That is because I ended up making strata, and I'll show you in a moment how I made that happen. So now let's put that story aside, because I made these mirror images from strata for that quilt. I ended up getting invited over to a friend's house, and the friend said, "Hey, you have to see what I've made." And I went and knocked on the door. The house wasn't a very big house, and in the living room was a contraption sitting in front of the television. And he said, "You got to look in here." So I looked through this contraption, and I could see the television, but it was a kaleidoscope. My friend had bought, the dressing mirrors that you can buy. They're not very expensive. They're thin and they're very tall. He took those and he bought 3 of them, and he put one here, one here, and one here. And I don't know if he hot glued them or taped them or whatever, but he made a triangle out of those 3 mirrors, positioned it in front of the TV so that when you look through it, you see a kaleidoscope of whatever the TV's doing. Now, first of all, I'm thinking, he's a little strange, but or maybe he was, I'm not sure, but I do know this. Looking through that as a quilter, as a baby quilter, I thought, how can I make that happen in a quilt? How can I do that? And I was trying to figure out how many fractions or whatever would come from 3 little wedges, 3 little pieces of mirror to get this whole entire circle of kaleidoscope. Now, I don't know if any of you are going to go buy 3 dressing mirrors and see if you can make your own life-size, human-size kaleidoscope for a television or not, but that's how this started. So now let's leave that story and let's go back to me trying to figure out what I'm going to do to make these mirrored images. And I decided I don't want the fabrics to be fussy cut so that this little flower is a perfect mirror image of that little flower. That wasn't my goal at all. So I'm going to go back to the strata here, and I'm going to turn the camera down onto the screen. Hang on just a second. I think y'all can see that. Yep. All right. So in this particular series, I want to go back to the blade, the necktie type thing that I was doing. I want you to imagine this is not a strata. This is a striped fabric. But I do want you to imagine that it's a little bit bigger, that it's made out of different strips of fabric, which is what we're going to do, and it's much longer. It's the width of fabric. But for the sake of this demonstration, I just want to show you I've used a striped fabric. If I fold this face to face, if I take a blade template, all right, and I don't want to put it so that it's perfectly straight. I want to just tilt it, and I don't have any requirement of where I tilt it, but let's tilt it to there. And if I cut this out, and I'm not going to be any more specific than just doing this like so, All right. I love this process. And, oh, sorry, my computer just went flying. And there. All right. If I have that shape, look what I've just made. All right. They're mirror images of each other. So I can do them this way, and they're mirror images. Or I could do it this way, and they're still mirror images. But that's how my blades for that fan dance quilt were made. The Kool Kaleidoscope quilt that we're going to make is going to do the same thing. We're just not going to have this kind of perfect necktie shape. We're going to do this with a template that's much stranger, and we're not doing templates today, but I can put this in. I could put it right there if I wanted to. I just want to make sure that I've put it at some kind of an angle. So I'll go ahead and just put that there. Again, I've got my fabrics are right sides together, so my stripes are laying on top of each other. And because I'm doing it two at a time, or two layers, and because the stripes are the way they are, this is how I end up with, get ready, this. And that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be creating our kaleidoscopes, not from striped fabric, but we're going to be creating the Kool Kaleidoscope from the stratas that you make. So let me pull this out. Is that pretty cool? I hope you're enjoying that. Now let me get to, I'm checking my notes because I don't want to forget anything that I want to tell you. So now it comes to the fabric selection. Many of you were able to get in on the fabric starter kits that were sold through the quilt show. I do not know right now if there's any left. I do know that they were down to just a few. So you might want to zoom over to the quilt show's shop, and if there's any left, I'm sure they won't be left by the end of this presentation today. But we had a warm kit, which is mostly the oranges and reds and yellows and stuff like that. Not all, but primarily a warmer kit. We had a cooler kit, and the only one that's available right now is the warmer kit. So I also want to tell you that even if you do have the starter kit, that's not for borders, it's for the kaleidoscope that we're making. Just the center, where is it? The center circle that we're doing. And then I'm going to talk to you about borders on one of these sessions, because the borders is one of the creative things that you get to do to finish up your quilt and make it really exciting. So I want to talk about fabric selections, because even if you have a starter kit, I'm going to encourage you to put a fabric or two from your own stash into that starter kit. Now, the main reason is because it's going to make yours the most unique. You're not going to have exactly the fabric that somebody else has, but also because I'm always talking about a zinger fabric, something that might really stand out. So you might just look at the fabrics that are there and find something. It could be a black and white check. It could even be a light fabric, just a plain, this is a very light fabric, but if it's put into a bunch of colors, it might end up becoming a dominant fabric. So it doesn't have to be a wild, crazy fabric. It just needs to stand out from everything else that you've got in the quilt, and it will become a fabric. The other thing I need to tell you, you can plan a zinger fabric, and it may not become the zinger. I usually find in this Ultimate Mystery Quilt that there's going to be some fabric that's going to stick out, stand out, and even if I didn't plan it, it's going to stand out. So you can add to your starter kit if you want to. Now, you're going to need approximately 20 yards of fabric. I'm sorry, 20 pieces of fabric, not 20 yards. And I recommend that they're like a third of a yard, 12 inches. You may not use all 12 inches. You may not even use the fabric that if you pull 20 fabrics, but pull out a nice collection of fabrics that you want to make your quilt. I'm going to show you a collection of fabrics that I pulled just to talk about fabrics. And these are all fabrics that I got in Africa, and I'm really kind of ready to use these. But let me just show you what these are looking like. So these fabrics, it doesn't matter that I'm not going to ever try to have a mirror image like I see here in my kaleidoscope. I'm just going to cut this wherever it gets cut, and we'll use whatever we're going to use, but this is going to read the same in the quilt. And then I'm looking at all of these fabrics and I'm going, well, they really are a lot of oranges. These are definitely very warm, but I also have some fabrics that are a little bit contrasting, and I would not have a problem finding something like, get ready, this. Suddenly I put this purple in, and that looks really good together. All of these fabrics, for me, I'm going to say they're medium. Some are a little darker, some are a little lighter, but they're not really light. This is really light. And I like to have one or two really lights, and that's what's in the starter kits. But I also like to have one or two fabrics that are really dark. Not many, one or two, literally. One would be sufficient. Two gives it a little bit of variety. And why do I want this fabric? Well, when we start making the strata, if you use a skinny dark, it's going to end up being, go to this side, like these little stained glass areas. They're not stained glass, of course, not at all, but this kind of breaks up the design and gives it more contrast. But notice that none of these darks are wide. They're all really skinny. You're going to determine your own width, and I'll talk to you about that in a moment. But essentially, the darks and the really lights, I try to keep basically skinny. And it's those luminous fabrics like this fabric, okay, these very luminous fabrics. This ended up becoming one of the dominant fabrics right here. But these luminous fabrics, they end up being the glow of all of this. So it doesn't matter if you're using batiks. If you like batiks, just go to your batiks. If you like to use traditional fabrics that may be reproductions, I mean, you could absolutely make this quilt with 1930s reproduction fabrics. You could use Civil War reprint fabrics. You can use the wonderful modern fabrics that we see. I know that there's Tula Pink fabrics, you can use them all and you can combine them as you wish, because again, what we're ultimately creating from all of these fabrics is we're creating the rocks or the pieces of glass that are in the kaleidoscope. They're going to do whatever they're going to do, and you're going to have a quilt that's going to be beautiful. So just want to see if I've got a message here. Oh, so the question is, do I only use cotton fabrics? And yep, pretty much. You don't have to. I'm trying to keep it simple for you. And our typical quilters cotton fabrics are the ones that I feel are probably the best to use. I'm okay with you mixing regular printed cotton fabric with batiks. I mean, there's a slight difference in all of that. The same thing, my African fabric here on the table is relatively loose weave. It's a relatively loose weave fabric, but I'm okay putting something like this in. And here's another dark, if I wanted to put like another dark in. So I like to do that, and I don't think that you need to fuss too much. If you like your fabrics, then I'm pretty sure that you're going to get exactly what you want. Okay, you're going to be happy. If you like your fabrics, that's all that's important. You're not going to plan the placement. You're not going to plan the angles. It's going to be what it's going to be, but it's going to be a lot of fun. So that's the fabric selections. Choose what you want. And I have had people ask me in the past, what about using stripe fabrics? To be honest, if you wanted to find like 5 bold stripes and not make strata, you could actually save the entire making strata process and just use stripes. It's a little more challenging because you have to line up the stripes when they're being cut, the way I kind of lined up the stripes on this fabric from earlier. But that's possible. So I want to give you that option. Another question that comes often is, what about fat quarters? Now, on the forum already, some people have gone in and says, can I use the fat quarters? And I have replied, probably not. The truth is, of course, first of all, I'm not the quilt police. And if you want to figure out a way to use the fat quarters, that's fine. But our strata is going to be the length of the width of fabric. And no fat quarter has the width of fabric. So you would have to then piece your fat quarters together to get the width that we need to make the strata, which means you're going to have seams in your strata that you're going to have to avoid, and or you end up having to cut over them and you have a seam that's unnecessary. So I don't want to tell you, no, you cannot use fat quarters. I'm just wanting to make your life easy, and it will be easier if you will use width of fabric, So now let's talk about making the strata. I want to tell you what strata is. Strata is simply several pieces of fabric that are put together to make a stripe. This is a striped fabric. This is not pieced together. But when you take strips of fabric and you sew them together, you're making a strata. Many quilt projects will say, cut 2 inches, 2 inches, 2 inches, so that we can cross-cut this 3 fabric strata to make units for a quilt project. In the Kool Kaleidoscope, you're going to make strata that is very uneven. If you look at this, there's nothing even about those. There's different widths. You're going to cut a strip of a particular width. The next fabric you might cut wider. The next fabric you might cut medium. The next fabric might be skinny. And the last fabric might be wide again. You're going to need anywhere from 5 to 6 to 7 strips of fabric per strata, depending on the width of the strips that you cut. And there is no instructions for this. My goal is for you to do width of fabric and make a strata that is about 7 to 9 inches this direction, all right? And that's just it could be 7 1/4, it could be 9 1/8. I don't care the measurement, it's just in that range. And you're going to make what is called a pair of strata. They are going to be identical. One pair of strata is 2 identical strata. And for this project, you're going to make 5 pair. Now, I also want to tell you, as we move forward, I'm going to give you some freedom to do things even differently than how I'm teaching it. So I will tell you right now, the reason that we have 5 pair of strata is because the instructions I'm going to give you on Friday will create, and they're going to be a little bit bigger than this, but you're going to have 5 templates. 1 template for each pair. So should you decide you want a larger kaleidoscope than I'm going to teach you, that's possible, you might end up with 6 templates. And if you have 6 templates, you need 6 strata, okay? If you decide you're going to go smaller, you might end up with only 4 templates, which means you need 4 pair of strata. So 5 pair of strata is 10 strata. So they're pairs, they're identical twins. So as you start making them, now I want to get a fabric to show you why this is the best tip I can give you for cutting your fabrics. When it comes to cutting the fabric, I want you to know that if I laid this out, I'm going to move my camera back a little bit. If I laid this on the table with my fold toward me and the selvage out here, which is how I normally would cut, when I do that, of course I have to square up, putting the fold right on a line or using a ruler that's put the line right on the ruler, because some of you don't use lines and some of you do. Your particular method is fine for me. But you're going to have to cut 2 strips from this for the particular strata that you're making. And if you do that, let's say you've decided arbitrarily, you've decided to cut 1 3/4 inch wide. All right, I would find my line it up, I would cut, I would come over to 1 3/4, and I would cut, and then I come, I've got a 1/4 inch here. So now where do I go to get to the 1 1/4 or 1 3/4? And it is really easy. So get ready for this. It is really easy to think that you've cut 1 3/4, and the second one you might have accidentally cut 2 or 1 1/2, and they're just 1/4 inch difference. And visually, you don't see that. And you end up making all your strata with this inconsistency in one fabric, and you won't know it until you put them together and you go, oh no, I have a real problem. I can't match a seam because I didn't cut both strips exactly the same. So stay with me, because this is the best advice I can give you for this week. When you're going to cut your strip, take your fabric, all right? Take your fabric, and so whatever it is, fold it onto itself. Now, I'll check my questions here. Hang on a second. Yep, prints are solids, and I've already got the fat quarter question answered. So I'm going to use a line to square up this edge. That's right on the ruler. I want to make sure I'm right where I need to be. All right, I'm going to square up this edge. Now, here's the brilliant part of this. Because I have folded this over, now when I come to cut 1 3/4, even if I accidentally cut 1 1/2, or even if I accidentally cut 2, no matter what I'm doing, I am cutting 2 strips that are exactly the same, even if they're not the size I meant them to be. Do you see what I just did? And it saves you time because you're cutting 2 strips at the same time. And you do that by folding your fabric over onto itself. So we have the full width of fabric on both of these, and both of these are going to be exactly the same size. So doesn't matter what you cut, that you could even go to 1/16 or 1/8. It doesn't matter. You also need to sew these together with 1/4 inch seams. No, sorry, you're not going to sew these together. You're going to create a strata. You're going to create your own choices of fabric. That's about 7 to 9 inches when it's finished, and they need to be identical twins. So if you have red, blue, green, yellow, orange on one, you're going to have red, blue, green, yellow, orange on the second one. They're identical twins. And remember, the strata, each strip needs to be a different width. The darks should be, I don't know, cut them 1 inch, because that makes them a 1/2 inch whenever you sew it into the quilt. You always have to include your 1/4 inch in your mind, but I wouldn't have any strips larger than 3 inches, because that makes them 2.5 inches when they're finished in the quilt. Here's another tip. When you make your strata and you're sewing all your strips together, I'm going to suggest that you have your wider strips on the outsides of the strata. That doesn't mean you can't have a wide one in the middle, but your dark strips, your little maybe 1 inch strips, put those inside the strata. Don't put a little 1 inch out on the edges. Let your edges be a little bit beefier, because that will allow you, whenever you cut into the fabrics, that will allow you to have enough fabric out there on the point of a template. So that will make sense later, but I do just suggest you're going to create a variety of fabrics. You're going to make 5 identical twins. And the width of your strips don't matter, other than I suggest that your lighters and your darkers end up being a bit thinner and your main body of fabrics are a little bit wider, and we go from there. Just double checking. The smallest width for a strip, well, you don't want to cut a 1/2 inch because a 1/4 inch seam plus a 1/4 inch seam is a 1/2 inch. You could do 3/4 inch and only have a 1/4 left. I think it's too small, but you could do it if you wanted to. I think that the smallest strip that you need to cut is 1 inch, and you won't have many of those because they're coming from your darks. The next thing about your strata that I want to tell you is that when you're making your identical twins, let's say I used this fabric in strata strip set number 1. I might repeat this fabric in fabric strip set number 3 or 4. It doesn't matter. I could use this fabric twice in the quilt if I wanted to. And if you want to do that so that it spreads across the quilt, then you simply repeat a fabric. You don't need to repeat all of your fabrics, just some of your fabrics. And you might repeat your zinger, okay, the one that you think is your zinger. You might repeat that in maybe 3 stratas. I don't think I would put it in all 5. So you're going to be creating your own random set of stratas. It's just that you're creating a set of twins 5 times. All right. Now, I know some of you have questions, so I'm going to answer those. The last thing that you're going to do, there's 2 things. This is a tip. I know these are the same fabrics, so I'm not sewing them together today. But if they were different fabrics and I'm sewing my strata, I'm going to sew my strata in pairs. Let's say I cut 6 fabrics or 8 fabrics for my 1 strata. I'm going to sew them in pairs first, top to bottom. But then when I sew the pair to the next pair, I go from the bottom to the top, the opposite direction. This is because on many cases with many sewing machines, when you're sewing a set of strips and you go from top to bottom every time, that strata wants to bend. And I have a feeling that has to do with the tensions that are on our sewing machine. If the top thread tension is a little in the bottom, then they start wanting to bow. If you go top to bottom on a pair, top to bottom on a pair, and then you put that pair together and sew from this side to that side, it offsets the bowing. So that's a tip. I think you can manage that. The last thing about your strata is you're going to press it. It needs to be beautifully straight, and I would press it so that there's no pleats on those seams. Don't press in a pleat. And on one strata, listen carefully, on one strata, press all the seams one direction, okay, away from you. Then on its mate, make sure the mate's seams all go the opposite way. Eventually, we're going to put these right sides together. And if we have seams on the top one going away from you and the seams on the bottom one coming toward you, we're going to be able to lock all of these seams on the strata together, because remember, ultimately, we're going to be putting them face to face so that we can create our mirror images. So that's basically everything in a nutshell. I want to make sure that I've told you everything. Yes, I pretty much have. And so I think it's a good time to go for questions. And I'm just going to get a little bit closer here and see what kind of questions there are. See, some of you, you're one step ahead of me and you've already asked the question and I've already answered it. So you're going to have 5 pair of strata. They're going to be width of fabric long. They're going to be 7 to 9 inches tall. So obviously, I don't care if it ends up being 8 1/4. It's all fine. And there's no way for me to plan this in advance for you. It is possible that you have a 9-inch strata, and when it comes to your template, there's a fabric strip that you don't even use. I can't plan that because it's part of the ultimate mystery quilt. It's going to be something that happens. All of these instructions are right here on the video. You'll want to, if you want to jot them down yourself, the instructions are right here. You can press your seams open. I avoid it because when we put the stratas together face to face, if you have pressed your seams in opposite directions, we can finger them together and make sure that they're locking. But if you have pressed all the seams open, it is much harder to align the seams on the top one to the invisible one that's hiding down below. Yes, you can press the seams open, but I would not on this particular stage. I just did all. That's so funny. That is just really funny. Select all. I just dictated this entire phrase to you. I need to do this. All right. John, I don't know if you're seeing any other questions. Do you shorten? No, I use a regular stitch length. I use just whatever. You know, for quilters, I like to use a 2.0 millimeter stitch length. The default for most straight stitches is a 2.5. And if you go to your quilting stitches, the straight stitch might be a 2.0. I like a 2.0. I don't want it to be so small that I can't unsew. If you would like, I wanted to share this with you guys because I want you to get inspiration. If you will Google Kool, that's with a K, Kool Kaleidoscope Ricky Timms, and go look at images, let me just show you really quick what we can make happen here. Let me try this. Yeah, so you can see that if you Google Ricky Timms, Kool Kaleidoscope or Kool Kaleidoscope Ricky Timms, you'll see the cover of my book. You're going to see a lot of examples of quilts that people made. Some of them are from my book. Some of them are out there on Pinterest. It's going to give you a wonderful plethora of various ideas that you can use as you go along. So I definitely wanted to share that with you today. Let me get back to eCam. Yeah, it's pretty fun to see all those that are out there. So don't hesitate to go scrolling around. And also, I want to let you know, I mean, nobody knows this but me, so I'm about to spit it out of my mouth. Once we're done with the class, I'm going to let a little bit of time pass so that you can finish your Kool Kaleidoscope. And then I'm going to send you to a place to upload these pictures, and we're going to have a showcase so that we can show off each other's show and tell. And I can't wait to see what you make with this project. Kate's asking about if you want to make a larger quilt, how do you figure the yardage? I don't figure yardage on this at all, and I know that's a cop-out question, but the truth is there's no way for me to figure yardage. I'm not even giving you good yardage when I say a third yard of 20 fabrics, because you may not use 20 fabrics, you may use only 15. But I wanted you to have a nice stash of fabric to pick from. And then the other thing is, it really depends. You'll see what you're doing at some point and you go, I need to make more of this. In the case of this fabric today, I only cut 2 strips from it. If I cut another set of strips for another strata, then this fabric is going to shrink a little bit. But even if I do, you see I'm still going to have some left over. So as long as you're giving yourself about a third yard, you should be able to just keep making fabric and making strata and doing this. I also would encourage you guys, this is how I feel about classes in general. I know a lot of people want to go fly their own wings and do their own thing, and I have no problem with it because I celebrate that. But if you do the project the way I'm teaching it the first time, it, by doing just that, will answer so many questions that you will know what to do when you want to make the alterations to it. So while I give you the freedom to make the alterations now, my encouragement is that you kind of follow the plan and you'll be done with this. Here's what I can tell you. You're looking at 5 hours average, maybe 6 or 7 to make your strata. The next thing is we're going to design the pattern. We're going to cut out those pieces. That's a day. If I was to make this quilt, this is a 2-day quilt. We're going to take 2 weeks, but it's a 2-day quilt to make. You're going to spend probably more time on your borders than you do on your quilt, because the borders are going to come from your own imagination and your own creation, which is wonderful. The quilts that are in my book or on the DVD, and by the way, you can get the DVD at the Quilt Show shop, at the Quilt Show online store. That DVD is there. There are galleries of quilts made by other people on both the DVD and in my book, if you happen to have it. And those quilts were selected primarily for the innovation of their borders, not so much of the kaleidoscope itself. I also want to give you this little piece of advice. I've taught this class enough to know that a lot of people are going to get their circle together, or their inner square, the main kaleidoscope, and you're not going to like it. I can't help it. I can't help how you feel about your quilt, but I can tell you this. If you were in my class and your name was Martha, and I go, wow, that looks great, and you go, I don't really like it. I go, but it looks great. I know, I don't really like it, but look at all these quilts. Yeah, they all look wonderful, except mine. I don't really like mine. For some reason, it's just within our DNA to somehow or another not like what we're doing. But I can promise you this. If you will push forward, if you will just keep going and get the borders on that quilt, however you choose to do them, you're going to like it a lot better. So I know it's human nature to celebrate everybody else's quilt and put yours under a microscope. Can I encourage you? It's the ultimate mystery quilt. You can't plan how it's going to look, and it's going to look great. If you just scan the ones on the web, you're going to see they all look fabulous, but I have no doubt that somebody along the way is going, I don't think I really like it so much, and I'd do it a little differently if I could do it again, and that kind of thing. I see a question about how do we get the templates. You get the templates by coming to class on Friday, and I will show you how to draw your own templates, because like I said, every single quilt is different, and part of that difference is because you are going to draw your own pattern, and it's so easy to do. I can't wait to share that with you. It's not a website, Jeanette. If you want to just see the pictures, what you do on your browser, whether it's Safari or Explorer, you put in Kool Kaleidoscope Ricky Timms, and then you click on the button that says Images, and it just pops open images. So it's not a website, it's just Google searching is all that is. Your border fabric, I'm asking, if a lot of people want to get to the end of the quilt before we started the quilt. I'm going to tell you the border fabrics and all of those things, that is something that you cannot plan before, because you don't know how the quilt is going to turn out. Once you've made the body, we will have a whole class on borders and how to go about doing the borders and making them innovative and yours. So don't worry about your border. All I want you to worry about this week is making strata. And on Friday, we'll take it from there. I'm just doing a quick look here to see what's happening. I see Kim Caskey in the list. Kim's taught this and made them. Kim, thank you so much for being a part of this today. It means a lot to me. Kim's up in Canada. It's good to see you, Kim. Your quilts, all of your quilts are going to look similar to this. This is the size and generality, but remember when I went onto the screenshot of the web page, they all look different. They all will just look different. And I need you to trust that process, just trust that it will turn out, because it's like a wonderful kaleidoscope. Some of you are going to get stars that are just bursting out, okay? Some of you will end up with these stripy bars that kind of fly into the quilt. Some of you are going to end up with what I call the medicine ring. You might have a kind of circular thing that happens in the whole quilt. And all of those are good. You just can't plan it. At least you can't plan it on your first one, because there's too much to think about, and just let it roll. You're gonna have a great time, everybody, and I hope the signal and everything's been good for you today. I hope you've been able to clearly see whatever I've been presenting, and just going to look to see if there's any more. Oh, on Wednesday, you guys, on Wednesday this week on the Quilt Show at the same time, Barbara Black is going to be talking about how to use the forum. So I know that you guys are on our playground. You know, you're a TQS family for us. So please pop back over on Wednesday, and you'll see how Barbara Black, who is our hostess with the mostest for the BOM, is going to teach you how to use the forum. The darkest pieces, just put them in the strata. Just put your thin little strips in the strata. Everything's going to become a mirror image just because of the nature of the process. So you don't have to worry about where you put stuff, other than I suggest the thinner blacks or the lighters stay in the more in the inside, and you have wider strips on the outside of your strata. I would not recommend ombre fabrics. You could do it, but it's going to not let the kaleidoscope do what it needs to do as well as I think that it should. You can use any kind of fabrics that you want to, shiny fabrics, velvets. I would just stick away from unusual fabrics unless you're really skilled with using those strange fabrics, and they're not strange because they're, you know, just outside the quilting norm. I just want you to be successful with your project, so don't put yourself. Is it jelly roll friendly? It is, except that then every single strip is the same width, and that doesn't seem friendly to me. So if you've got some jelly rolls and you want to use those infiltrated into your strata with different widths, I would say yes, that would be great. The darker strip does not need to be the same size in all stratas. You can make some 1 1/4, some of them 1. You could even go 1 1/8. It's just, it doesn't matter as long as you cut them both exactly the same. And that trick of folding them over and cutting both at the same time will save you a headache later on. All right, you guys, I'm going to say goodbye for today. It's been fun seeing you all. I think you're fabulous, and I cannot wait to see what you do. Have some fun. Get into the forum, get to know each other a little bit, and thank you for being a part of the Quilt Show family. It's great to see you all. Cheers.